By the time I was born and we were living in New York, my great-grandparents had already sort of flown and moved back and retired in the Dominican Republic, but they would always visit. So I remember every time they would visit, like every 3 months. We were a family that was always on a plane, and still today I've always been on a plane. And they would open up the suitcases and they would bring from Dominican Republic like their plantains and their cheese. It's like we have a version of like a halloumi cheese that you fry that is the most delicious
Tell me
thing.
about it. What's it?
Oh, that cheese. It's just called queso frito.
Yeah.
You know, and they call it queso frito. I don't know if it's called something else, but they would bring it, the blocks of it, and the moment she would open that suitcase and that cheese would pop out, she was immediately slicing it and throwing it in a hot sizzling pan. And then the salami. You know, there was this company in Dominican Republic. It's still there. It's one of the biggest salami companies. We eat a lot of salami, but we fry our salami. We don't really eat it like as a charcuterie, like, you know, cold and stuff. We can, but not this particular salami. This one is frito. This one is fried, and we would just eat that as a snack. And then the plantains, where, you know, I think we've inherited the eating of plantains from our African sort of origins. And you boil the plantains and you mash them with butter and salt, and you eat them, and they make it into like a paste, and it's called like a mango, which I know that in Africa, in certain countries, they call it like a fufu, right? But we call it mango. And you put then the fried salami and the fried cheese, and you grill some pickled onions over it. And we just
starving here. I think we're all
the smell.
Why don't we just go in the kitchen, forget the interview, and
Let's do it. But the smell of that in our kitchen meant that you know, abuelita from Dominican Republic was in town. And we would, for the whole 2 weeks that she was visiting with us, my great grandmother, we knew that we were going to eat well. And she would sometimes go to the markets, certain markets in Queens, or she would venture out and sometimes go either downtown to Manhattan or go to Brooklyn, and she would buy the coconuts, like really good coconuts that they would bring from the Caribbean.
What would she do with coconut?
Desserts.
Dessert.
All types of macaroons. And she would make like these biscuits that we call coconetes, and she would make those. Or she would grab a spoon, a very big spoon, and my great grandmother was you know, she was just a very simple woman, and there was nothing she could do. That, you know, and she would scrape the coconut sort of meat out of the coconut, and it would kind of curl up. She would scrape it, and she would curl it up, and then she would put it on a pan with sugar and baking soda and vanilla, and she would let that cook down, and then it would dry up, and then she would divide in these little like rolls. That it was our version of the macaroons.
Did she have recipes? Did she just do it?
It was all here. It was all here.
So
and she was a feisty lady. By the time I was born, she was already a great grandma. So she was just like very feisty, like a really gritty woman, you know. And she would grab everything with her hand. Like she would. There was one story though that the biggest culture shock for us, you know, that when we moved to Dominican Republic was just
after your father died.
Was just how closely we lived with nature. You know, like she had her garden in the back, so she would get all her herbs and fruits and everything from her backyard, and she would come in, and it's kind of like when you gave me the tour in your kitchen. There wasn't a written menu. She would make the meatballs from scratch. You know, she would grind the meat. She had her grinder. I remember like, oh, the grinder's out. She would like, it was like a transformer. It came like a Lego piece. She would like put it all together, screw it up, like, and just put the salami and the meat. She would the ribeye, the cheese, and she would just grind that. And then I would sit there, and she would be like, come on, wash your hands. And she would put like oil on my hands, and then we would make meatballs. And I was like, oh my God. And then you try these meatballs, and they were just, I haven't had a meatball like hers.
Oh, you should make it.
Yes.
While you remember, it's part already. I have I have a Hungarian grandmother.
Oh, wow.
And the story is that she traveled with her rolling pin. That whenever she came to visit, she'd come up just 100 miles from New York, and she'd bring the rolling pin. And the famous story in our family was that she came to see her first grandson, my older brother. And she came, it's quite a long trip, and she got to the door, and they said, would you like to come and see your grandson? And she said, let's eat first. You got her priorities. But what we're talking really about is, you know, to see your face light up, to see your memories, to feel and hear you, is that food is so important.
It's
you know?
so
And
important.
Yeah.
What else are we going to ask her to make us?
Yeah. And so that-
Salted
yeah.
codfish. You know, she would also make like a curd milk dessert that was so good. And I think that the moment my great grandmother passed away, I stopped eating desserts because I have a savory tooth. I don't have a sweet tooth. As you know, but only for hers. I would eat any desserts that she would make. And then she got sick with Alzheimer's when I was 16.
Yeah.
And she sort of slipped away from us mentally quite rapidly. And then we took care of her for 11 years. And I just remember looking at her like when I was like 19 or 20, it's like, I'm never going to try anything your hands ever made. And that was, I remember I cried a lot when that sort of like realization hit me.
It was over.
And she's right in front of me and I was just painting her nails, you know, just to distract her. And I just looked at her and I was like, it's over.
But she was an artist, you know. She
was.
What you're talking about is
An illusionist, a magician. She was like Moses.
The creativity going in there, you know. And now, probably, maybe if she'd been at a different time, she might have been a chef. You know, she might have given the pleasure that she gave to you as a grandmother, as you know, one of the women in the kitchen right now had that option to say, well, actually, this is what I love in my work, and this is what I'm going to create. I always think that cooking is a bit like art, you know, except art lasts forever. You know,
does.
And then somebody eats that lemon tart you've worked hours over, and it's gone. You know, and for your grandmother,
you
that's the
can.
same
My
thing.
great grandmother.
Your great grandmother.
You can make those memories last forever. You have to pass it down. I have a picture of my grandmother in my kitchen. She's the first person I see, and the last I say goodnight to. And by keeping a picture of her, we are keeping her alive, because my sons, they won't have the experience that I had with my grandmother and my great-grandmother. They lost their great-grandmother really young. So it's in the stories I do tell them.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the conversation, please click the subscribe button. There you will see more videos on my YouTube channel. We'll also be posting new content that you can only find here. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to Ruthie's Table 4 in partnership with Montclair.